Hello, my friends. I am Donnie Winter. If you didn't know already, I'm a Godzilla fan, academic, poet, resident overanalyzer, and host of the show Growing Up with Godzilla. It's been a long time since I've done a video essay, so I made the decision to revive this long-form format because, well, it's easier to expand on certain topics this way. So this seemed to be the most appropriate format. To be frank, when most people think of Godzilla films, they don't immediately gravitate to the human characters. In fact, some critics in the past have argued that many Godzilla films often have poor character development due to the focus on destruction and mayhem. I used to be one of those people. However, I've drastically changed my perspective as I've grown in my love of the franchise. At its core, Godzilla has always prioritized creating fascinating socio-political commentaries with regard to the human experience, beginning as a sort of metaphorical protest against the then-present nuclear age specter. The Godzilla franchise went on to expand its storytelling to reflect on topics ranging from environmental awareness, international relations, to, well, the moral implications of tampering with the boundaries of life and death. Amid these fascinating topics and riveting kaiju battles, one type of character has been sorely overlooked, and those are the Mad Scientists. 2 years ago, I was doing my yearly Godzilla movie marathon, which coincided with the completion of my second poem collection, Feats of Alchemy. Shameless self-promotion. Since I'm a nerd, of course, I was like, I'm gonna write some poems and do some character analyses featuring the mad scientists of the Godzilla franchise. First, though, I needed to define the nebulous meaning of mad scientist. If we look at mad scientist theories largely centered in Gothic literature, Mary Ellen Snodgrass defines the mad scientist as, quote, a scientist who indulges in antisocial behavior, staying isolated and working apart from the rest of society. They are inconsistent with the principles of reason, inventing a field of study that goes against known scientific theories and is impossible rationally, end quote. Based on contemporary work, many may assume that a mad scientist is a dangerous, unhinged, and zany character. Snodgrass's definition, along with examples we see in the Godzilla franchise, suggest that mad scientist characters are individuals who, being confronted with incalculable odds, a loss or challenge, concocts a solution via unnatural means, sometimes ending in tragedy, other times ending in success. The struggles and successes these scientists face serve as the central root in the Godzilla franchise's socio-political commentary of the human experience. And this essay will focus on the motivation, behavior, and actions of these standout mad scientists. I had to narrow it down to 4 people, so bear with me on these 4 selections. To begin, the first arguably mad scientist character we encounter is none other than Dr. Daisuke Serizawa from Gojira 1954, the first Godzilla film. An ingenious chemist, Serizawa is known for his experimentation with the element oxygen, and throughout the film, his experiences culminate in the invention of the oxygen destroyer, a weapon of mass destruction. Behaviorally, it's apparent that while he's somewhat introverted and isolated from everyone else, his laurels rest in the post-World War scientific zeitgeist surrounding element manipulation. As the film progresses, audiences begin to witness Serizawa's decline into hysteria at the realization that he has created something as destructive, if not more so, than the hydrogen bomb. Of course, with the revelation of Godzilla's theorized origins in the film, the creature's attacks on Japan could not be thwarted without some sort of extreme option. Thus, Serizawa makes the decision to use his oxygen destroyer on the kaiju, but not before destroying his research. He then chooses to deploy the weapon, tragically taking his own life, while simultaneously taking Godzilla's. Despite Serizawa reflecting the definition of mad scientist when it comes to motivation and actions, his behavior with coming forward and working with the government to destroy Godzilla makes a unique shift, transforming the mad scientist from being the antagonist, as we see throughout Western science fiction classic literature, to more of a tragic protagonist. If we compare Dr. Serizawa to, say, Mary Shelley's Dr. Frankenstein, Serizawa possesses far less hubris and more willingness to do what many may deem as the right thing based on the challenges present. Granted, the 1995 film Godzilla vs. Destoroyah notes Serizawa's problematic history, considering that the use of his weapon leads to the mutated creature Destoroyah. However, I digress. That's a conversation for another day. Ultimately, Gojira 1954 sets the stage for a frequent reuse of the tragic thread binding both protagonist and antagonist. It blurs the line between how we define those roles through how we sympathize with their loss. Ultimately, Dr. Serizawa shares the same fate as Godzilla. Both subjects are the product of humanity's hubris and arrogance. The only difference is that Godzilla never had the power of choice, whereas Serizawa did. This adds even more so to the tragic nature of both characters. If we move further to the Showa era's final film, Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975, audiences are introduced to another mad scientist in the form of Dr. Shinzo Mafune, a marine biologist. And what I love about him is that they really played into the zany, his hair looks wild. His look definitely reflects mad scientist. Ironically played by Akihiro Hirata, who played Dr. Serizawa originally, Dr. Mafune served as a sharp contrast to that character. He was eccentric and vengeful, exiled from scientific circles for his research and experimentation, aimed toward one day manipulating marine life. Despite being a pariah among fellow scientists, Mafune continued his research and experiments in isolation, culminating in his daughter Katsura being fatally injured as a result of one of his experiments. Consequently, aliens from Black Hole Planet 3 ally themselves with Mafune, restore his daughter in the form of a cyborg, then use both to wage war against humanity with their Mechagodzilla and the Mafune-manipulated Titanosaurus. Gradually, Mafune realizes that his daughter merely serves as a tool for these aliens, and the film concludes with both of them tragically dying. Mafune's madness, while significantly more apparent than Serizawa's, focuses on his need to create a better world for his daughter. In his narrow vision, he easily sides with the alien invaders, considering they exploit his main weakness, which is his desire to live in a utopian world where his daughter can thrive, though they take advantage of another weakness, his desire to get vengeance on humanity for ostracizing him. Thus, Mafune's fall from grace serves as a contrast to Serizawa's heroic self-sacrifice. From the beginning, he acted in retribution as a result of being justifiably disenfranchised for his problematic intentions, ultimately destroying himself and his family in the process. If any doctor in the Godzilla franchise reflects Snodgrass's definition of mad scientist, it's definitely Mafune. As the franchise shifts into the late 80s Heisei era, audiences are introduced to another mad scientist in the 1989 film Godzilla vs. Biollante, who so happens to be my favorite. Dr. Genshiro Shiragami, a geneticist, and his daughter, Erica, a botanist, work toward breeding plants to thrive in inhospitable climates. Shiragami, working for a rather questionable organization in the fictional country Saradia, uses stolen Godzilla cells to facilitate regenerative properties in plants to allow them to withstand desert climates. Tragically, Shiragami's daughter is killed in a terrorist attack on their facility amid an international war to retrieve the valuable Godzilla cells. Years later, he agrees to work with the Japanese government to create an anti-nuclear energy bacteria simply to gain access to Godzilla cells again, but this time for a specific personal reason. He uses them with what DNA of Erica's he had spliced into roses, to keep his daughter preserved through a hybrid plant. Of course, the regenerative properties of Godzilla cells mutate the rose into Biollante. With the help of psychic Miki Sagusa, Shiragami discovers that Erica's consciousness is present within the creature. The international battle surrounding these Godzilla cells culminates in Biomajor, a terrorist organization, releasing Godzilla himself from Mount Yuhara, and throughout the film, Shiragami witnesses Biollante evolve from something beautiful into something horrifying to defeat Godzilla. In another tragic turn of events, Shiragami ultimately dies at the hands of a Seradian terrorist aiming to get the Godzilla cells and the anti-nuclear energy bacteria. Similar to both scientists before, Shiragami makes a series of decisions based on his scientific motivations. However, he focuses more so on improving human survivability as opposed to creating weapons of mass destruction or manipulating the minds of wildlife. Truthfully, if any doctor reflects the classic misunderstood mad scientist like Shelley's Frankenstein, it's Shiragami. Driven by his grief initially and preserving his daughter's legacy and memory, he later regrets the decision of creating Biollante. This film poses a poignant question that recurs throughout the remaining Godzilla entries. Who is the greater evil, the monsters themselves or those who create them? Finally, the Millennium era of Godzilla films seem to veer away from the mad scientist character. However, we get some semblance of one in the form of Dr. Tokumitsu Yuhara in the 2002 film Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Now, some of you might say, Donnie, he really does not fit the bill of a mad scientist. I'd say yes, in a way, though his character demonstrates an evolution of the mad scientist. Being a renowned biologist and having suffered the loss of his wife, Yuhara committed himself to wanting to preserve species from extinction by creating biotechnology capable of sustaining the living components of extinct or near-extinct species. The Japanese government eventually recruits Yuhara for his expertise on a project to use the remains of the original Godzilla in creating a biotechnological weapon to thwart kaiju attacks, named Kiryu, or Mechagodzilla. He hesitantly agrees, but falls in love with the idea when his daughter Sarah is allowed to be at work with him. Sarah, being very sensitive to the nature of life and death, often serves as her father's tether to the significance of creating new life from the deceased. In fact, this theme carries over into the next film, the 2003 film Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S., though neither Yuhara or Sarah appear. Which, salty side note, along with Akane Yashiro's absence throughout that film, well, most of the film, that was a huge mistake in my opinion, but I digress. Yuhara's decision to use the DNA of the deceased Godzilla to create a new life form strictly used for human need became the central conflict when Mothra appears before humanity to declare war over them trifling with the tapestry of life and death. Eventually, Kiryu asserts its consciousness and chooses to lay itself to rest with Godzilla, thus repairing the damage done to that balance. Yuhara, even in legacy throughout both films, serves as a distinct contrast to the prior mad scientists. He's sociable, engaging, awkwardly flirtatious, conscious of the gravity of his decision-making, and accepts accountability. Granted, his daughter and his eccentric affection for Akane Yashiro were largely the catalysts for it. Regardless, his willingness to help create Kiryu did, in fact, do what he originally sought to do: save Japan from Godzilla's threat and preserve something. Yuhara, unlike those prior, serves as a scientist whose madness simply resides in his fierce selflessness and passion for preservation. This marks a turn in the Godzilla franchise for what defines a mad scientist. Considering they no longer need to be the recycled, defiant, excluded, tragic character, this character allows for the mad scientist to come full circle, to go from being a terrifying pariah to being of critical use to society. The scientist finds a balance between basic human empathy and zeal for one's work. Retrospectively, these scientists are but four of many fascinating human characters of the Godzilla franchise. and the Godzilla franchise has many others to offer. Each reflect some aspect of Snodgrass's definition of the mad scientist. However, select individuals like Doctors Serizawa, Shiragami, and Yuhara definitely, humanize this archetypal character in a way unseen in this type of science fiction. Ultimately, the Godzilla franchise has brought the mad scientist in full circle. They began as the self-sacrificial, tragic scientist capable of horrifying creations to the accountable scientist capable of contributing without losing oneself entirely. This is probably one of the most crucial commentaries the Godzilla franchise has to offer. Humanity is imperfect and makes mistakes. However, it's how we find accountability and rectify those mistakes which defines our legacy. Anyway, what do you think? Are there any other mad scientist characters from the Godzilla franchise I left out? Are there any other kaiju or characters you'd like me to analyze? Let me know below. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. Also, check out my show Growing Up with Godzilla and my book Feats of Alchemy. Thanks for the support.